G'day students, welcome to your first lesson of your bivariate data unit, but also as well on the second part, your linear unit. But for now, we're going to work on bivariate. This session, we're going to focus on an introduction to bivariate data, also an introduction to time series. But we're focusing mainly on time series graphs for this lesson. So let's get into it. Your intention today is to be able to produce and analyze time series graphs. Okay, two things: produce and analyze a time series graph. And as your success criteria, you'll hopefully be able to sketch a time series, describe the trend of a time series, and make future predictions using the data displayed in the time series graph. So a time series is basically a sequence of data that's recorded at regular time intervals. So it's data that's being recorded at certain time intervals. A certain variable is measured, recorded at regular time intervals. So for example, when you want to record a time series, so a variable that changes over time, one example is the temperature or maximum temperature each month. Or another example could be the amount of profits that a business makes every year. Or the speed of a runner every 10 seconds. So as an example of a time series here, this is obviously, you all know this guy, Usain Bolt, okay, fastest man alive. And this is recorded data of him running. So this is actually from the Googles. So I found this. According to this, at 5 seconds, Bolt can travel at a speed of 5 meters per second. So this is not miles per second, it's meters per second. After 15 seconds, Bolt is able to travel or run 10 meters per second. Okay, at 25, it's 11, 35, 11.5, and he reaches his maximum running speed at 11.9 meters per second at 45 seconds. Okay, so that's quite fast. So this guy takes 45 seconds to run at his maximum speed of 11.9, which is essentially 12 meters per second. Imagine running that fast. It's quite crazy. But basically, that's an example of a time series. Okay, so it's data that's recorded at regular time intervals. So this data here is recorded for every 10 seconds. Okay. Now, a time series graph is how we represent this data. So a time series graph is used to represent data over time, obviously. And we have a line here. So this is what we call a time series line graph. Okay, so it's a line graph. It's got the times or the variables changing over time, and it's all joined by a line. Okay, so representing the data in this way helps us to determine and also comment on the trends. So trends are very important when it comes to time series. Something to note and remember with a time series graph is that you always put time on the x-axis, and then the variable that changes is on the y-axis. Okay, so keep that in mind. Time is always on the x, the variable that changes is on the y. So when I talk about time, it could be days, weeks, months, years, or it could even be like every second. It could be every season. Okay, but essentially remember that time is always on the x-axis. As an example here, you can see the share price each month for whatever the shares are here. It starts at July, goes up, it's $4, and then it goes down sometime in October. January, it goes down again. Between January and April is the lowest point, and then it goes back up again in April. So you can see how it changes over time. Let's do an example. A milk bar records the amount of ice cream sold each month for a period of 6 months. So they're recording amount of ice cream sold, okay, for a period of 6 months. The findings are shown in the table below. So here are your months, starting from Jan all the way to June, 6 months. And this is the amount of ice cream they sold in each of those months. So the question here is, plot a time series data of the ice cream sold in a line graph for a period of 6 months. Part B, let's describe the trend. Part C, which month had the highest number of ice cream sales. And in part D, based on the trend of the sales of the ice creams, will the sales increase or will they decrease in July? So all of these questions will make it easier if a time series graph is drawn. So let's start with that. There's my data. Let's plot a time series graph for this. So this is where you'll need to be able to hand draw your graphs. Okay, so make your X and Y axis like so. Okay, remember to put time on the X axis like this. Okay. Also, one thing to include, if your data allows it, is that you can actually include a break here. And what that break does, so if this is 0, right here, what this break does is it actually skips all of the numbers up to 30. Okay, because if you look at your data, there's no numbers here below 30. You only need to start at 30. Okay, so include a break there if you need it, if you want to skip numbers that you don't need. Next, label your graph and the axis. So remember, call this month, call that amount sold, and obviously the name of this graph. Okay, remember the time is always on the x-axis, and then the variable that changes is on the y. Plot your point. So if you have forgotten how to plot, just look at the table and plot it on your graph. So for January, it's 67. So January 67 right there. February 70. So Feb 70. Right there. March 63, so 63. April 57, 57. May 57 as well, and then June it's 30. After you've plotted your points, join the dots with a line. Join the points with a line. So there's your graph. Right. So next question was describe the trend. So when it comes to describing the trend, you don't have to write me an essay, but you're at least going to give me a general description of what's happening in the data. So what I have here is that the amount of ice cream sold until Feb steadily decreases until May, where the amount sold drastically decreases. So this is saying is the amount of ice cream sold increases until Feb, and then it has a steady decrease until it reaches May, where the amount sold drastically decreases. Okay, so you could say that in here it has a general downwards trend because it's going down. But in terms of an answer, I would say something like this. Okay, so include a very brief description of what's happening. Again, you don't have to talk about a lot of things. Okay, it doesn't have to be an essay, but talk about the general trend of what's happening with the data. Part C, which month had the highest number of ice cream sales? Well, that's easy. Which one has the highest? Okay, February, which has a sale of 70. So state that. The month, and also how much it was sold on that time. So the time and the variable for it. Part D, based on the trend of the sales of ice cream, will the sales increase in July? So if you were to look ahead and make a prediction, will the sales increase or decrease? Well, we're talking likely here. So we don't know exactly what would happen, but what would happen or what might happen based on the trend here. So if from Feb to June, it's been decreasing, it's logical to say that on the trend, July will most likely decrease. Okay, so the next month, it might be like whatever it is down here, a lower amount. Okay, and also you could think about it from a seasonal perspective. Notice how in January and Feb it was quite high because it's probably summer at that point. And then from there, as the seasons become colder, so this is probably autumn, and then when it gets to winter, obviously the sales will decrease. So there's some things to think about when you're doing time series. Just think logically about what's happening with the data and how it applies in the real life. So as a recap, a time series is basically a sequence of data that's recorded at regular time intervals. So you're recording it at regular intervals of time, where variable is recorded against time. Okay, so what that's saying is you record a variable that changes over a certain period of time that's recorded at regular intervals. So every month, every week, every second, every 10 seconds, that's the time intervals. And time series data can also be represented using your line graphs. And they allow us to obviously determine and comment on the trend that is presented by the data. So when it comes to time series graph, a line graph is always involved, and that helps with making predictions and making comments on the trends. So that's it for this lesson. Go ahead and do chapter 9F, which is in page 699. I'll upload the questions for you guys, but you're doing questions 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Thank you very much.